Hey, welcome back to the channel. So this is an episode for all my Evinrude guys. I rebuilt this motor a couple years ago. I wish I would have videotaped it, or recorded it rather. Videotaped, that shows how old I am. Anyways, there's nothing on YouTube for these V4s about fully rebuilding the motor. There's a couple videos where you can see the disassembly of a V4 block, but nothing about rebuilding it. I wish I would have done it 2 years ago when I rebuilt this V4. Long story short, I went and bought a donor motor from a person that had bought a boat and trailer. The guy refurbished his trailers. He didn't want the boat or the motor. He knew nothing about, two strokes or anything. He was just trying to get rid of the boat and the motor. And so I went over, I needed the block. It's a 140, it's a 1980 140 Crossflow. If you know anything about the Crossflows from 79 to 98, they were pretty much all the same. There was a few changes made to the casting of the block to incorporate the fuse panel for the tilt and trim. There was a couple bosses that were added into the casting, as well as the single power pack. In 1980, they had 2 power packs, one on each side of the motor. So there was just little changes, but essentially they're all the same. Internally, they're all the same. And so what I did is I went and bought this 1980 140 Crossflow because I just wanted the block. I was gonna use this block to rebuild. I used to have a 1995 90 Crossflow, and it had eaten some of the top rings like they always do. The previous owner did no maintenance. When I bought my boat, the 90 was already on there. It was weak. I knew it was gonna have to be rebuilt at some point. I ran it for 3 seasons, and then it ate a top ring. The pistons were all destroyed. Again, like I said, not from my doing, but just from the previous owner. So anyways, instead of rebuilding that one, I had read that, you could do this with the 140 and essentially make the 140, which was a crank rated horsepower, into essentially like a prop rated 115, right? So if you look at the 140s, they had the bigger carbs with the bigger jets. They're basically identical to a 1995 115 Crossflow. So that's what I did. I made like a Frankenrude, as they call it, I mixed parts from 95 and 1980. So what I did is I used the 1980 block. I used the 1995 intake and reeds. I used the 95 throttle. So I used the 1995 throttle cam and all that set up right here. I used all the 1995 electronics. So the single power pack over here, single power pack. I used so right here where I have the lifting eye would be the water-cooled rectifier. They did not have that in 1980 either, but they have that in the casting of the block. They just didn't have, they had a cap right here. This plate right here was just right there in place of the water-cooled rectifier. So the provision was already in the block, so that was easy to do. And I think that's about it. And then I just zip tied the fuse panel for the tilt and trim back here, because like I said, they didn't have those bosses in the casting of the exhaust plate back then in 1980, so there was nothing to bolt this to. So it's got the bubble back exhaust with the block stuffers, the exhaust stuffers, everything that the 115 would have. So it's essentially a 1995 115. But the thing, anyways, after I rebuilt it, I did new pistons, rings, all new crank seals, got it rebuilt, threw it on the boat. I moved to Mexico. And for the last 2 years, I've been living in Mexico using my boat on the Sea Cortez. If you've seen any of my videos, you can see the 140 running on my Sea Swirl Striper 18-foot center console. The motor has run flawlessly. I have probably well over 500 miles total trip on it. A lot of my trips one way is 20 miles. So, a lot of my trips round trip is, 40 to 65 miles. in a day. I have, I mean, well over 10 trips. So I mean, I bet it has, if I added it up, I have everything on Navionics. If I added it all up, it's well over 500 miles of total runtime. But the thing has been running great. Anyways, back in November, I was out, I ran 30 miles offshore, fished all day. When I went to leave the reef, it was, I was on plane running, and all of a sudden the boat just fell off like you unplugged the fuel line. Like it was out of gas. We weren't out of gas, and I couldn't figure out what was happening. Anyways, long story short, the guy I was with had to sit back in the back of my boat and pump the primer bulb the whole way home. Took us forever to get back, took us like 2 hours. This seas turned nasty. It was like 5-foot seas. We were fucking getting wet the whole time. It sucked. But we made it back, and I thought, okay, well, it's a fuel pump, right? Put a new fuel pump on it. I thought possibly it was sucking air. You know, the fuel lines were probably 3 or 4 years old. So I've owned the boat 5 years. Like I said, 2 years ago I rebuilt the motor, so the fuel lines were probably the original, or I think I had replaced them when I first bought the boat. So they were old, so I replaced everything, the whole fuel system. From the pickup tube in the tank, which didn't need it, but I did it anyways. Every fuel line, primer bulb, fuel pump, so the entire fuel system was touched. Went out for a test run, it was still doing it. Boat jumps up, boat idles all day long. It'll idle indefinitely. You can put it in forward gear and do, you know, forward idle indefinitely. You punch the stick forward, it jumps up off plane. You're 30 miles an hour on plane, and then maybe 30 seconds after that, it just falls off again, does the same thing. So I couldn't figure out what was happening because I had replaced the entire fuel system. I couldn't figure out why it was doing that. Let's see, what else? I can't remember what else I did. I did one other thing that I thought, then at that point I thought maybe it was electrical. So I replaced the stator had a short to ground. My tack circuit hadn't been working for like 2 years. I wasn't getting a tack reading. So I replaced the rectifier regulator and the stator. My stator was shorted to ground. And so I replaced both of those, thinking possibly it's an electrical issue. Went out, it was doing the exact same thing. On that day, I found out again that if I sat there and pumped the primer bulb, I was kind of sitting backwards at the helm, and I had one hand on the primer bulb, one hand on the steering wheel. As long as I pumped the primer bulb, this thing would run 30 miles an hour, 3/4 throttle indefinitely. So I knew at that point it was sucking air somehow. When I came back home, I put it on the hose, and I did the brake cleaner, carb cleaner test where you spray off the block. So naturally I started at the case halves right here, and as soon as I sprayed right here on the case halves, it almost killed the motor. So it was sucking in brake cleaner. So I knew at that point definitively that the case halves were sucking air, and I'm assuming that's why the fuel pump the fuel pump is not refilling the carb bowls. So when you drop down to idle, the air leak isn't as significant, so the fuel pump can actually refill the carb bowls, right? The carb bowls are full, you forward stick, boom, high fuel demand, you're on plane running 30, and it takes about 20 seconds for the carb bowl to run dry. And that's basically what is happening. The fuel pump can't keep up at high demand. There's an air leak. So once I found out that it was the case halves leaking, I knew it had to be pulled. So that leads us to where we're at today. So I pulled the motor from the boat yesterday. I got it on the bench right here, and because I didn't record or make a video of me rebuilding this motor like I should have, because I had a bunch of people that have asked questions on my YouTube channel about the previous motor, and I've been putting this one on there just to show off it running, basically. But if you look on YouTube, there's a lot of videos about the V4, but they're mostly like little things like electrical issues, or how to install a coil pack or something easy like that. But there's no fully rebuild videos on YouTube. So I figured I'd record this one. even though we're not doing a full rebuild, we're gonna split the case and break it down to the crankshaft. I'm not gonna pull the crankshaft out because I'd have to undo the connecting rods. I don't wanna do that. Everything's good to go. Like the crank got new seals, 2 new, you know, top and bottom main seals. It got the caps underneath these caps right here. You have the 2 O-rings. Those are all brand new. Everything on the crank was new in terms of seals, all genuine Evinrude parts. So I don't want to touch any of that. I'm going to do the most minimal labor possible to get to the point where I just need to reseal the case halves. The reason why I think the case halves was leaking, and it took 2 years, I guess, for it to start leaking, was I used the Loctite 518 like I was supposed to, right? I have the factory service manual right here. So I have the factory service manual. I followed it to the T. I don't cut any corners. Now in saying that, I did cut 1 corner and I guess it came back to bite me. So I used the Loctite 518. You're supposed to use this Lock Quick primer. It's an activator. It helps the 518 cure. The manual tells you to use it. Now, I lived in Phoenix, Arizona. I rebuilt this motor in late April, early May. By that time, it's already reaching 100 degrees in Phoenix. I took it to mean that, because if you look at the can, if you read the can, it literally says, speeds up adhesive cure. Speeds it up, meaning it just makes it cure quicker. So it doesn't say that it won't cure at all if you don't use it. So I took that to mean that you use that in like cold weather climates, or if you're rebuilding the motor in the wintertime or high humidity, whatever, you know. I didn't think I absolutely needed to use the primer because I was in Phoenix, Arizona. It was like 100 degrees when I rebuilt the motor. The motor didn't even, I rebuilt it and then it sat for like 2 months before I even did the first start on it, on the hose. So I figured by that time it was fully cured. You know, I didn't think I needed that because like I said, the can just says speeds up. It doesn't say it won't cure at all if you don't use it. So I think what happened is the 518, when I did the case halves, it didn't cure at all. And I guess it just coincidentally took 2 years for it to suck the 518 through the mating flange, and now the mating flange is leaking air. So, and it was sucking, when I did the brake clean test, I did it on both sides of the case half, and it was sucking air on both sides. So, right here is the case half right there. It was sucking air, it was sucking brake clean on both sides. I think this side of the motor right here, which would be the port side of the motor, I think the port side was worse than the starboard side. But regardless, it was sucking the brake clean. So I think what happened is finally after 2 years and that long run on that last trip, we ran 30 miles offshore, and I think that was the most that the motor had ever continuously ran. It was like an hour, took us an hour to get out there, hour and 10 minutes to get to that reef. And I think that's the longest the motor had continuously ran without dropping to an idle or shutting off, you know, to make drifts across the reef. A lot of the reefs I go to, they're only like a 30-minute drive, 30 to 35. So like, I think that was double the time, and maybe that was just either, you know, that trip was the amount, you know, 2 years of use was enough to it finally sucked all the sealer out of the case. And the pulse, it must have a weak pulse at high RPM, and it's because it's sucking more air. It's not, the fuel pump's not producing enough fuel to keep up or refill the bowl. So anyways, that's a quick deal. I could talk forever. This is already 15 minutes in at this point. It'll take forever to upload these videos, but I'll show you each step. I just broke the bolts loose for the intake. So I just broke the bolts loose for the intake. I'm gonna go ahead and get that off. I'm trying not to remove these primer lines. One other thing, in 1980, instead of running the electric primer, lines to the carburetors, the primer lines go to the bypass ports, and it injects the fuel straight into the cylinder via the bypass ports, the bypass covers rather. So right into the bypass ports right here. You have nipples. You have the brass nipples right on the bypass covers. I actually think it works better, to be honest. But I had to replace all those lines, and I didn't use genuine Evinrude. I used a 3/32 Tygon, like 260-degree temp line. It has worked amazing, but the line is so small. It's such a tight fit to get it on those brass nipples. It was very hard to do it. And now after 2 years that I can feel the line isn't as elastic as it was when it was brand new. So it's gonna be a bitch to get those lines back on those nipples. So I'm gonna try to remove this intake plate and just kind of keep it to the side without removing all of those primer lines, because I don't want to deal with it, to be honest. Not removing the heads, everything was brand new. The water deflectors, anything that I could replace while I was in there 2 years ago, I replaced with all genuine Evinrude parts. So the water deflectors, the thermostats, all of that shit is brand new. All the gaskets were new. I used aviation gasket sealer like you're supposed to. So I don't want to touch any of that. The motor has 125 PSI across all 4 cylinders. I do a compression test like once every 6 to 8 months, and the PSI rating has not changed once. All 4 cylinders have had 125 PSI the 2 years that I've been running it. I just did a compression test before I pulled it, same numbers. So I don't want to touch the heads. I don't want to touch anything that I don't have to. I'm not going to remove the exhaust plate, the bubble back, nothing. We're just going to try to get in from the top here, get the case split, reseal it, and put it back together. All right, so we got the intake off, the reed cage off. Reeds look great. Overall, I mean, the reeds are immaculate. So the reeds look immaculate, just like they did when I installed them. I think those are the 1980 reeds, if I remember correctly, with the stuffers, the intake stuffers. I think, unfortunately, I think I'm gonna have to take these bypass covers off. So, because I just don't want to deal with these lines, and I'm gonna need to tilt the motor back this way and set it on the intake side right here, so I can use a punch to hit the dowel pins, and then I got to get that the bottom crank seal cover. I think they call it the bottom cover. It has the crank seal in it. So I don't have any room to work right here. This is like max. I can't pull that out of the way any further without stretching the primer lines. So instead of taking the primer lines off, I think what I'll do is I'll just remove each bypass cover, and then all of that will go as one, and I can set it out to the side over here. So I'll just have to remove each cover right here. All 4 covers will come off, and then this intake primer lines, intake 4 bypass covers, I can just set over there on the side or something and get it out of the way, because I need to pull this motor back down this way so I can punch these dowel pins out right here. You have one dowel right here, and you have another dowel down here on the bottom. Hard to see right now, but so yeah, I'm gonna have to tilt this motor and rest it. This is gonna have to face down right here. So I'll probably have to get that off. One thing I wanted to note while I was in here, I'm not sure if most people know this. I only found this out when I was rebuilding this motor, but the bolt right here for this throttle cam, the bolt right here goes into the intake. So you can see that bolt goes into the intake. And when I rebuilt this, I used thread sealer on that just so that that couldn't be a possible air leak. The other thing I noticed was, coincidentally, that bolt as well as one of the starter bolts, one of the bolts that holds the starter to the block, also goes through. There's a through passage to the intake. You can see it, I don't know, let's see, right there. So that's the bolt. Right there. And it goes through. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. I don't have a light, unfortunately. But I don't have a flashlight down here in the garage. It's upstairs in my house. But that hole that's the bottom hole for the starter. It goes through, all the way through to the intake. So I sealed that, and you can still see the red thread sealer. I think I used the 518 because the factory service manual tells you to use the 518 on certain bolts when you put this back together because they need to be sealed. And so I think I used the 518 on that bottom starter bolt because, like I said, it goes through, so you could potentially have an air leak on that bottom starter bolt. I don't know how tight the threads are on there. Like, I just think it's at least possible. So I just, FYI to anybody doing this, those two bolts go into the intake, you know, through. So you need to use some type of thread sealer on there. Anyways, we'll get the next thing, get this cap. These two, one right here, one right here. Then I got to get to the bottom down here. Got to get to those bottom ones right there. And then the mains. Main, 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 and there's two on the bottom down there. So, I mean, we could have this case split in like 20 minutes. So we got the bypass covers off so I could get the intake out of the way. So these pistons and the piston rings look immaculate. Like, no joke. There's not a speck of carbon on these pistons. I'm really happy. So that's what kills these old Evinrude Crossflows, is the top ring usually breaks because you get so much carbon buildup in the cylinder and on the pistons. It gets inside of the ring land, which is the groove, you know, the ring groove in the piston. And once enough carbon gets in the ring land, it starts to push the ring out. And once it does that, the ring ends up catching on either the intake port or the exhaust port, and it snaps the ring. And once it snaps the ring, then the ring's in there bouncing around, and it destroys the top of the piston, or it'll get caught between the skirt, the piston skirt, and the cylinder wall, and it'll score up the cylinder wall. And depending on if you catch it quick enough, you might not need to bore out the cylinder, but if you don't, usually you have to, you know, oversize and open up the cylinder to clean up the cylinder walls. So I forgot to mention, when I went and bought this block, I measured the cylinder walls. First, I stuck a camera down in there when I was at the person's house. The cylinders looked clean. That's when I said, I shook his hand and said, I'll buy the motor. And then when I got it home, I took it apart. I measured the cylinders because I wanted to know if I needed to bore it one size over, and I can show you I still have my measurements right here. But it's worth it to do it yourself because it's not that hard at all, and then you don't have to pay a machine shop to tell you what you already know. So just buy the inside dial gauge. It's like, you know, $50 to $80 on Amazon. And so here's my numbers right here. So I got really lucky. This block was actually in really good shape. I didn't have to have it machined or bored. I measured the cylinders myself. They weren't oversized. They within spec, because again, get yourself a manual. They're on eBay, 50 bucks. It's worth it. You have all the specs in there. I think it's .004 is the factory spec, that once it's over that, you need to bore it. But I got lucky, it was under .004. They weren't oversized, they weren't out of round, and the taper was good. So those are the three things that you need to measure. And the factory service manual tells you to do 2 measurements, one at the top, and then they show you one like middle way through the stroke. I did 3. I did one at the top, middle way, and at the bottom of the piston, or the cylinder rather. And I got really lucky, and all I did was hone this block, and like I said, it has perfect compression, 125. So, and you can see the rings right there look immaculate, and the skirts of the piston still look really good too. So I'm definitely happy that I did everything on my own. I didn't rely on a machine shop. And honestly, if you look online, you can actually bore at home too, with grinding stones. You know, the experts on the forums tell you not to do that, but you can definitely do it, and plenty of people do, where they bore at home. You just gotta, it's nuance, you know, you just gotta have enough understanding, do enough reading, have enough confidence in your skills, and obviously that comes with time and experience and all that, but 2-stroke motors are simple, dude. Don't overthink it. Like, these things are, this is like an RC car engine right here, you know, just a bigger version. It's not hard at all. But, so yeah, I did everything on my own, and I acid dipped the block to get all of the water passages clean, and I got all the carbon off of it. So I'm really happy. This motor's been great the last 2 years. It just, you know, it sucks that the case half started leaking air, so. All right, so we got the case, got the case split. So, yeah, definitely, you can see that none of the gel seal, it's gone. Like, there's nothing on this case, and you can see where the case was leaking at the very bottom from the 2-stroke oil. So right here, all 2-stroke oil right here. Also, there was one other note on my main bolts right here. This middle one, which was right here, that was the first one I went to crack, because you're supposed to do the inside first in a crisscross, right? Just like you would on any other crank or head. You always start on the center. When you're taking it off, you always start in the center. Putting it on, center. So I started there. The first one, I went to crack it. It was finger tight. I could have just unscrewed it with my fingers. And the factory service manual doesn't tell you to use thread locker. So the factory service manual doesn't say to use thread locker on the main bolts, on the crank mains. It does tell you to put thread locker on the skirt, right? The skirt bolts. So the smaller flange bolts, it does tell you to put thread locker, and I did. You can see it. But I'm gonna go back and look in the manual, because if it said to use thread locker, I would have used it on the main. So I'm assuming that the factory service manual doesn't say to use thread locker on those crank mains, but one was completely loose, and I know for a fact I torqued these down. So that when I put it back together, I'm gonna use thread locker on those mains, because I'm gonna clean it up and then clean it up and get it back together. I think everything else is good. Like I said, I replaced these O-rings and the crank seals on both both upper and lower crank seals I replaced, plus those 4 O-rings on the top cap and the bottom cap. I replaced those. Those were genuine Evinrude. I don't have any. They look good. Plus, if I had to replace them, I would have to pull the crank to do that, which means I'd have to pull the pistons and the connecting rods. So I'm not gonna do that. I don't have them anyways. They look good. They're only 2 years old. They're still protruding. They still feel good, like rubber. And they're still protruding, so they haven't been smashed down enough to where I think I'd have to replace them. All right, we're back with the motor. It's the next day. So just got everything cleaned up, both flanges, degreased, denatured alcohol, brake cleaned. They feel clean. They feel extremely clean. We're ready to get this show on the road. So I just greased Evinrude triple guard grease, the O-rings right here on both sides. I have all my seal rings with the gap pointed up, just like the factory service manual says, right here. Triple guard grease, splits and the seal rings pointed up, and we're ready to go. So I'm gonna put the 518 on this side, on the block side right here. And this you don't have to be quick about because it doesn't cure in air or without the primer. So we can put this on and we're not under the gun yet. And then we'll do the activator on this side over here. And I got this half cleaned as well. All right, so I'll check back in when we get that done. I just got the 518 laid out, my red spaghetti. Let's see how it looks. So the last time I did this, I might be able to include a photo when I edit this video. The last time I did this, I actually took my finger and spread it out evenly. And because I had read that that's a method, this time I'm not gonna touch it. I'm just gonna leave it like that. Put the activator on this case half right here. All right, put the activator right here. And then I might even just mist that side in activator and just squish the thing down and bolt it up real quick. So the next part is just get ready to, got all my bolts cleaned. They're kind of laid out. This shit got all messy today, but so yeah. The next thing is activator. I might even put a mist of activator right here. And then put that thing down. You have to do your the main bolts, those Allen heads, the big ones. Main bolts first, like snug but not tight. And then you gotta do your dowels. You gotta put your dowel pins in real quick. And then you tighten everything down. And then and then you put all the rest of the bolts in, tighten everything down. Do the mains first, then you do the perimeter, the flange bolts. So I will, I'll check back in when we do that. All right, she's all torqued down. Main bolts torqued, 18, 20 foot-pounds. And you go in stages and you just go center, and then you go around in a circle. center, around in a circle. Got these 4 caps back on, cap screws back on. Got the flange screws. The flange screws are like 60 inch-pounds. Yeah, 60 inch-pounds. So that's like 5 foot-pounds. It's like snug and not much more. You don't want to strip those out or break one off. These cap screws are 10 foot-pounds. So again, not much more than the flange screws. And then that's it. I just gotta scrape these. I gotta scrape some of the gaskets off these biport pass windows right here. I threw a coat of black paint on the bottom here. 2 years ago when I rebuilt the motor, I didn't paint it. I should have. I kind of have like OCD. I like things to look nice, but when I rebuilt it, I knew it was a rebuilt motor, and I thought it kind of looked cool, almost like rat roddy, where like some of the paint was coming off, you know, like rat rod style, like patina. Some of the paint was coming off. You could see that Evinrude must use like an orange primer at the factory before they paint the motor. So like the bottom right here was all orange. The bottom was all orange. It's this orange paint you can see right in here. Yeah, you see that orange? It's like an orange reddish paint. It's like the primer they use on the block before they paint it. So like some of that was coming through. Then you had the factory blue flake on like the exhaust, and like the heads looked decent. The block was like, some of the paint was chipping, so it was down to like bare aluminum. My intake is black because it's from the 1995. And then the rest of the block and the heads were that blue sparkle, like that dark blue flake sparkle from the Evinrude factory. So like it was a mismatch. I thought it kind of looked cool. I just thought, I'll just leave it like that because I know it's brand new. Kind of looks cool, like rat roddy. If anyone pops the hood, they'll think like it's like some old ass motor, but in reality it's brand new, you know, from the inside out. So I left it like that, but the last 2 years it's been bothering my OCD. So I'm gonna do a quick and down and dirty paint job on it. So like right now I just started on the bottom. So yeah, we'll make it all black. I might do the heads in this metal flake. It's like titanium gray. I did the trailer wheels on the boat trailer. I still have some of it left. It's like a metal flake. It's like a titanium gray, like dark gray with metal flake in it. I might do the heads with that. We'll see we'll see how far I want to take this. But if not, it's just gonna go all black and it'll be just down and dirty. I'll just quickly wipe a rag over it to degrease it, and then I'll just spray it with this oil-based paint, and if it sticks, it sticks. If not, fuck it, I don't even care. But yeah, so she's all together. I used the primer on the case half, and then I sprayed, right before I dropped the thing on there, I sprayed the primer on the shit that I had laid down on the block side. So it's got double primer on it. It has to seal this time. If it doesn't seal this time, I don't know what's up. But so yeah, it'll be back on the boat in the next few days. I think you need 72 hours for it to fully cure. So hopefully in the next few days I'll continue this video and you'll be seeing me put it on the boat there. But so yeah, that's everything. Just got to do, like I said, do the reed cage. I'm gonna go buy some more spray paint tomorrow, but yeah, plop the reed cage, the intake back on there. Put the, I have gaskets. I have new gaskets for the bypass ports. Get those cleaned up, put the gaskets on, aviation gasket sealer, put the bypass ports in, get the intake on, of course, like I said, and then that's pretty much everything. And then we can plop it back on the boat and start redressing it. So the good thing is I only had to take off the starter, the rectifier regulator, and what else? I think that's it. Oh, the stator. I had to take the stator off. Stator, timer base, rectifier regulator, and the starter. And then of course like the fuel pump and various things, the throttle linkage, all that. So it'll be easy. It'll take like an hour. So I'll show you that when I get there. Peace.